If you're in the market for a high-end cooled astronomy camera, then today is a good day indeed in my estimations, because Player One Astronomy, this is a company that I'm very fond of myself, I'm a huge fan, has just released to the market their two new cooled astronomy cameras, the Poseidon series, that's a monochrome and a colour version. They've also released alongside this something I didn't know about, but some bundles that are available for purchase, and I'm really excited to jump into that and kind of just take a chilled out look with you guys. For anybody who's interested, we're going to break down everything to do with them. Well guys, why not start with the Poseidon C Pro? That's the colour version, the one-shot colour one, which I'm hoping to receive soon. And let's go down this page a little bit and take a look at all the options that are available. I am going to be trying to keep this as uncut as possible, although there might be the occasional pause because, well, for anybody interested, a month ago at this point I had COVID, and I'm still, even to this point, left with a chest infection from it. So if there is a pause, I've just gone to go cough a lung up, and that's about it. So I'll be back as soon as I possibly can now. As you can see, there's two separate options. There's the camera only at $1,869. So that's priced really quite aggressively, I would say. If we just take a look at the price in America from OPT, at the 2600 MC, they're coming in at $2,000 effectively. But they also offer a bundle. So this comes with the camera, the filter draw max size, and the FHD OAG max. So that's their larger sized off-axis guide that they've begun to sell now. We're going to take a look at those as well. I've got those open in different tabs so we can go through everything together. But yeah, I think that's a fantastic value deal looking at it. $1,869 to $2,100, and for that you're getting that filter draw and the OAG. Top marks, Player One. I do like to see bundles where it saves the consumer, that's you and me, some cash. Now it looks like they're going to start shipping as anticipated in early December, so that's great to see. I know there's been a worldwide shortage at times of these 571 chips, but it looks like they've got hold of some of those. As you can see, it comes in two different flavors, the color and the monochrome. Both have got a thermal delta of 40 degrees that they're capable of. I think that's 5 degrees more than the 2600 MC Pro is capable of. I think they're a 35 degree camera. They both use those new Type C USBs, which maybe not is to everybody's taste, but I personally think it's a great move because you can't get them the wrong way around in the dark or whatever, which we often operate in doing astronomy. And they're a really long-lived, port. I think that, like I've mentioned before in previous videos, you use them all the time on your phone, let's say, if you're using an Android phone or whatever. And soon to be iPhones in Europe, they're being forced to switch over to USB-C. But they're long-lived, not easily broken, so that's good to see. And it kind of all folds into the fact that I think these cameras have been really carefully designed and built to last. Now, as you can see, they've used more DDR3 RAM than the other options on the market. 512 megabytes. Interesting choice. No bad thing though. Now, without going through absolutely everything, one of those things I want to touch upon again is the fact that they've gone for this 4-point tilter that is really importantly rearwards facing. So if you're going to do any tilt adjustments using this camera, you're going to have a much easier time doing it with this thing, because you're going to be able to leave the camera in situ on the scope where it's actually going to be getting used, where you need to kind of analyze and correct for any tilt problems in the optical path or on the sensor side of things. You're going to be having a much easier time getting rid of tilt using this kind of system. You can also do well with like the 3-point adjustments, like a bar stool adjuster, for want of a better explanation, like you commonly see in most tilt plate implementations, where you oftentimes just leave one of them alone and just adjust the other two, and you should be able to level things up from there. But I think this makes more sense because each one of these push-pull pairs matches up with an edge of the sensor, so you can identify where the problem is and work at getting rid of it, which I really like to see. I can't believe it's taken this long for something like that to reach the market, but again, well done Player One for getting it out there now finally. I really do like the design of these cameras, I have to say. It looks like they're going for that frosted finish to the camera, which I happen to really like. I've got 3 Player One Astronomy cameras now, and they all have that frosted feel to them and appearance, and it just looks so premium and feels great to the touch too. I know it shouldn't matter for something that's going to live most of its life outside at night, but you know, when you're spending this much on something, you know, they're no cheap thing, these cameras. Why not have it be pleasing as well to the tactile, as well as just the general usage? Now, interestingly, looking at the front of this, I know that they've adopted this quite large tilt plate, but it looks like physically the body of the Poseidon is going to be about the size of the 2600 MC Pro. The 2600 is physically quite a large camera, and this looks set to be about that kind of sizing. So I'm expecting it to weigh a good little bit, which maybe is worth consideration if you guys are using, you know, less than top end focuses and stuff. The weight of these kind of optical trains does add up if you're using a heavy filter wheel and off-axis guider, and then the cables hanging down and things like this. This can make focuses sag, but I don't think it's avoidable. With a sensor of this size, I'm not sure they could have made the body any smaller and still reached that kind of 40-degree thermal delta, which they've gone for now. Interestingly, I'm noting that they've managed to pull 71,000 electrons of full well depth out of this thing, which I think is very similar to what QHY opted to do with their implementation of the 571. They've gone for like an extended full well capacity at 0 gain, and it comes back into line with, let's say, the ASI offerings and such by the time you hit the high conversion gain mode. Just interesting to note. I think it's one of those things. It's good to see that they've done that. I know that ZWO's version is 50,000 electrons at 0 gain, so just something that they opted to not do, I suppose. Not sure the reasoning behind that. One other thing you can note, just looking at the front of this, is that there's threaded holes right there all the way around the front. So I'm assuming they're blocked from stray light being able to enter through into the like the frontal chamber of the sensor right there. I would expect that. But they're on there so that you can attach the matching filter wheel or filter draw system, or indeed off-axis guider as well from Player One Astronomy. We're going to touch upon those in a moment, but it's nice to see bolt-down options. It ensures that everything goes together completely orthogonal and can't really introduce extra tilt into a system, which is really good. And also, it's got the added benefit when things are bolted down rather than just threaded. Let's say an accident happens and you bump your filter wheel or whatever, as you're maneuvering around your telescope in the dark, you've got no chance of derotating that filter wheel from the sensor itself, which would cause you to need new flats once again. Just one of those things, unlikely to happen, but you know, if it did, it would be saving you some time and you'd be happy that you'd gone for a bolted down option, I would say. Just looking at the rear of the camera now, as you can see, they've opted for what looks to be a good sized fan. I would say that's potentially larger than what I've seen on other offerings to the market so far. There's those 2 USB-C ports on there, so there's the main one and a device one, so that's probably acting as a small USB hub. I would say a powered hub for controlling the filter wheel or the guide camera or whatever you'd like. There is a 5.5 by 2.1, I assume, power jack on the back. I know that these cameras aren't coming with a power supply, so that's something you'd have to provide on your own. Just going down the page a little bit further now. It looks like we've now got some instructions on how to address tilt in your image. So it looks like everything is mirrored effectively. So if I'm interpreting this correctly, the bottom is actually at the bottom, so the sensors may be mounted upside down. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, hopefully someone can make sense of that one, but it's good to see that they're actually trying to show you how to get rid of tilt, because it really is one of the main features of this camera, I'd say, is that fantastic implementation of a tilt plate. Going further down now, we're looking at the heat sink and kind of sensor chamber design, and interestingly they've added a Teflon spacer rejecting the heat back to the camera chamber. So I assume that any heat that exits the camera is going to have to either sink its way through the sensor chamber, which is good for keeping dew out of there. I think it's got a powered dew heater as well, which is also actually controllable rather than just switchable on and off. You can ramp up or down the amount of power going to that window heater. But yeah, any heat that leaves the camera has to be actually actively synced through the heat sink, which is interesting to see. Now, scrolling down a little bit further, talking about that DDR3 cache of 512 megabytes. The size of the sensor, if you've already looked into the 571, then you'll be familiar with this, I would have thought. Here they're talking about why a native 16-bit analog to digital conversion is useful, because when you start to stretch that data with, let's say, 12-bit, like it's shown on the left-hand side here, the histogram view is highlighting the fact that there's going to be lots of effective gaps in that data when represented on a 16-bit histogram like this, if I'm interpreting correctly. Whereas a true 16-bit camera being read out in 16 bits is devoid of those gaps, or at least massively reduced. I think it is rather than 16 bits of dynamic range, it's about 14 actual bits. But it provides much more, as it says, sample resolution by offering that 16-bit ADC. So good to see. That's not exclusive to the Player One or anything like that, but that's why they opted to implement that on a 14-bit sensor. You need an ADC that's higher resolution than the actual sensor is capable of. Now then, their non-amp glow offerings, that's native to this sensor as well. I don't know if they're going to be applying their DPS, that's the dark pixel suppression technology, to this camera or not, but that looks like a very, very clean dark frame. 300 seconds dark at -20. Very good to see. I actually owned a 2600 MC Pro before, and I loved it. It's a bloody fantastic camera if you've got one. I had to part with mine, unfortunately, to afford to build this place that I'm sat in right now, my observatory. Among other things I had to part with to fund this. So that's why I'm especially happy to be getting a 571 sensor back, and especially in this implementation of it. I really do like Player One's kit. It all seems so well thought out. Now, interestingly enough, they're talking about the fact that you can actually use this thing as a uncooled camera due to how much power USB-C can deliver. You can actually use this without it being plugged into the power if you just wish to use it, say, off-grid, where power is at a premium. And that is an option actually with this sensor because it's got such low dark current. If you just manage to use it at 5 or 10 degrees or whatever your ambient night temperatures are wherever you live, you'd still be getting extremely clean usable images from this thing, which is interesting. So you don't have to actually cool these things that deep. I remember when I had my own 2600, I used to cool it to 0 degrees most of the year, sometimes -5 in the winter. Now it's showing you the cable usages right here, so you, as we said, connect it up to the filter wheel, or you can connect to their guide cameras or other guide cameras. I assume it'll support those, and the actual main connection to the PC. Interestingly, here they're talking about the cooling system tests that they've performed. So it's showing you the ambient temperature by this device right here, and then showing you the actual cooler power, the sensor temperature, and the set point that's been requested. So -19, and it's reached that while exposing light frames, so that generates a little bit of extra heat too. Yeah, it's reached that with a fan speed of 70% and 89% cooling power, so it's fully capable of reaching that 40-degree delta that they talked about. And here's another test, the maximum test. So the fan is set to 100%, and it made it to 41 degrees below ambient at this. Really impressive to see. So it's not just numbers plucked out of thin air. They've tested it, and you know, there's the proof from what the camera can do. I think when I get mine, I'm going to be using it mostly just at around about -5 or 0 degrees, as I did before. I don't really see the point in stressing the thermoelectric cooler that much and shortening its lifespan for, honestly, an imperceptible gain in dark current. You'd never notice it. I think we're going to touch upon that with some graphs just down below. They've got over voltage and over current protection, which I think they have actually in the other cameras along their range, so that's not just specific to this one. I think that's also in the Uranus C that I have already. The Apollo M Mini and the Neptune C2 that I have. Good to see. Again, it just protects your expensive gear with one more redundancy added in there. Now we're talking about the performance charts. So at gain 0, the camera's got 14.26 stops of dynamic range, so just a little bit over 14 stops, and that extended full well capacity of 71.7 thousand electrons, and the readout noise at 0 is 3.96 electrons. Really fantastic performance. When the high conversion gain begins at gain 125, however, that's where it kind of drops off a cliff right here and drops from 2.91 to 1.357 as of this graph. The camera's back to having 13.58 stops of dynamic range, so just shy of that 14 mark, and 16.6 thousand electrons of full well. And as we mentioned, the read noise really does drop down. That's probably where I'm going to use this camera most of the time for me. As you can see, there's that bump up in dynamic range, so in my estimations, there's probably very little reason to use it at gain 124 or something. You'd be better off served by using it at gain 125 or gain 0, most likely in most situations. But maybe you can think of some sort of implementation where you might want to use it at a specific gain lower than that. Now this is interesting. They're saying this camera can run at 15 frames a second in RAW 8 mode, which is massively faster than I ever got from my 2600. I think that thing got around about 4 frames a second. So that is impressive. If they've managed to get that out of RAW 8, that's huge. That'll make, I assume, scale up even better if you use a region of interest crop and want to use this as a bit of a multi-purpose camera, perhaps for some planetary imaging too. I expect it'll reach higher frame rates than the other versions of the 571 would. I don't know how they've done that though. I can only assume, perhaps, and this is just a complete assumption, that maybe they're using faster onboard electronics to read that actual sensor out that much faster and get on to exposing the next one. So I don't know, that's just a guess. Here we are, they're touching upon that extended full well capacity. Readout noise, this is a promise that they've had really since I've known of the company, and that's that, you know, when they give you read noise performance, or really any of the performance that they give you, it's actually from tests, real world tests, rather than just theoretical data and then extrapolations of the points in between, which could be inaccurate. They actually take the time to test these things, and they say, by all means, test it yourself at the you know, to kind of prove what they're getting from these things. So that's, you know, a lot of product confidence, and you really like to see that when you're spending a pretty penny. Now, as we mentioned about the cooling on these cameras, they really don't need cooling that deep. Amazingly, it goes down to 0.000105 electrons per second per pixel at -20, which is it's absolutely ridiculously low. It may as well just say 0 by that point. Equally impressive, I think, is the fact that it's 0.001178 electrons per second per pixel at 0 degrees. That is somehow lower than ZWO again from their implementation of the 571 at the same temperature. So I don't know how they're doing it, but they are doing it. I'm sure we'll be able to test this for ourselves when these are out in the wild. I could be wrong about this, but let me just double sure if I can find. Sorry about this. Yeah, dark current versus temperature. So at 0 degrees, if we just trace this up, the 2600 MC curve is showing 0.00391, so almost 0.004, whereas we've just seen this at 0 degrees is 0.001178. Both are ridiculously low numbers, so we don't need to worry about splitting hairs with this, but it is just interesting to note that it seems to be a really mature implementation of this sensor, if they've truly managed to do that with it. Interesting. Here we've got some relative quantum efficiency. So I think it's stated that the color versions of the 571 are around about 80% or so quantum efficient total. So if we pretended that, you know, it was actually 80% efficient total in green right there, then red is about 90% of that. So somewhere around 72% total quantum efficiency, and blue just a little bit below that as well. Massively sensitive cameras, and I can absolutely confirm that from when I had my own 2600. It was a pleasure to use in all situations, really. I absolutely loved it, and I'm sure this is going to be completely no different now. Another interesting thing I'm noticing, I remember my 2600 MC Pro had a 42mm threads on the front. That was the kind of main female thread on the front of the camera, whereas Player One have opted to have an M48 opening, which should further reduce the chance of any vignette on that camera sensor. Again, very good to see. It shows they've really thought about this and how it's going to get used perhaps on extremely fast optical systems where the cone of light entering the camera is going to be at much kind of shallower angles than slow systems, which tend to have a very steep light cone. Interesting. Looks like the back focus, as I think I already knew about this, but it's 17.5mm on this from the faceplate to the sensor plane. Pretty standard stuff. I think the 2600 is the exact same as that. Now here we're on to the back focus solutions. So most common flatteners, reducers, chroma correctors, things like that tend to be optimized for around about 55mm of back focal length. So that's what most cameras get to be kind of used along with. So the spaces that come in the box are going to make you reach that, just if you want to use nothing else in that optical path, if you're using a separate guide scope or whatever. That comes with the correct spacers. Here's another option where you're using the filter draw max and an extender. Again, reaches you to 55. And finally, another solution right there with the filter draw and the off-axis guider. That's actually the version of the camera that I'm going to be receiving for review. The filter draw and off-axis guider and camera bundle. Really excited for that, actually. Now the camera box, as we can see, looks like a fully coloured cardboard box. Good to see them using recyclables like that. So the camera comes with a metal cover like the 2600 did. Also great to see. Reduces, you know, any chance of accidental damage. If you dropped this in the dark or something, then a plastic cap could potentially give way and end up shattering your optical window. So it's good to see that they've gave a proper metal cover. Really, 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 you want to see things like that on a premium camera, and it's good they've included it. A bunch of different spacers, a 0 back focus distance M48 to M42 female adapter, a T-mount, which is probably of dubious usability on a sensor of this size, unless you're not bothered about the edges being completely vignetted because you're going to be perhaps using a region of interest crop for some planetary imaging or something like that. Good that it's in there. Anyway, a rocket blower, that's included in the other player ones. Good to see again. And 3 different cables. So again, interesting. Comes with a wrench, I assume, for adjusting the tilt mechanism, and 8 M2.5x5 screws. So these could be spares for attaching filter wheels and things like that, I assume. Don't actually know. Cable tie and a camera bag. That looks to be a pretty nifty camera bag. Probably some sort of pressed weave or something like that. I don't really know. But I think we've had a good look at the color one right there. Now, again, back to that pricing. I think that's coming in really at quite a good price point. It seems to me, if Player One can develop some momentum behind these cameras, and I think there's no reason that they can't, because you know, they're pretty to look at, and I'm sure they're going to perform fantastically well. I think these could end up becoming pretty much a market leading option for people. So fair play to them for that. Now, on the monochrome side of things, let's take a little look at the purchase options here. So if you want to buy just the camera, you're looking at $2,299. So a step up in cost from the color version of the sensor. The 2600 Pro, so the ZWO equivalent to this, comes in from OPT at $2,480. But the other option here, the camera and Phoenix filter wheel, that's Player One's version of filter wheel, and the FHD OAG Max. By the way, we're going to touch upon these filter wheels and filter draw systems and the OAG as well. I'm sorry that this is a very long video, but I thought, why not take us time and have a proper look together? And I'll just give you my thoughts as they come. But that comes as a bundle right there for $2,599, which I think is massive value. If I was in the market for a mono camera, that's what I'd be buying personally. Really love to see that. Now, that represents some serious value for people, and I can't see that getting beat, to be honest with you. I'm just checking down now, see if there's anything extra that I can point out about the monochrome camera. It looks slightly different quantum efficiency curve, as you would expect to see. None of those dips in between the Bayer matrix color filters. So it's a much more smoothed out curve of quantum efficiency. Actually looking quite efficient right the way out to about 800 nanometers wavelength right there. So again, interesting to see. It's not like the, let's say, the 585, the Uranus C that I've got, where it's got extended infrared sensitivity, but it still does have long wavelength sensitivity like that. That's good to see. Mechanical drawings all look just about the same. The back focus solutions are showing slightly different, so you can see if you bought the kit, you'd be using this version. So you'd be bolting the Phoenix filter wheel directly to the camera, and then your FHD OAG Max to the front of your filter wheel, and then you've got options from there as well of how to actually get it on your telescope. What comes in the package, all the same stuff as the color one. Again, good to see that you're not missing out on any goodies, extras or anything like that by choosing color over mono. Now let's take a look at the filter wheel. So I've got this open already. This is the 7x36. I know that with APS-C size sensors, as long as the filters are mounted close to the sensor, you're absolutely fine with a 36mm filter. So that's what they've opted to implement as their solution. So that's perfectly valid, and it's a 7-slotter as well. So you can quite comfortably fit in LRGB and SHO filters, which is what you'd most commonly end up using. Looks like these are going to start shipping around about the same time as the camera. Also looks like there is a 2-inch filter wheel version that's a 5-slotter. Not sure if there'll be any future, even like, let's say, a 7x2-inch filter wheel or something like that. Who's to say? For their full frame cameras and such that are going to be coming out. Looks like a really pretty thing. I'm glad to see that nice frosted effect going on this too. Just looking around, so it's got a Hall sensing technology, so hopefully it should have extremely accurate sensing of its position, so it lines up perfectly every single time, which makes, of course, using flats time after time after time a lot more viable. I mean, most filter wheels on the market are really more than accurate enough, so it's interesting to see their implementation. I'm no doubt whatsoever that it's going to be extremely accurate. Apparently more accurate than an infrared sensor. That's good to know. A super thin hybrid stepping motor. Interesting. USB-C included on the filter wheel to save on some thickness of this red piece right there, so it's overall a little bit slimmer. And again, I've stated I am a fan of USB-C, so I'm just extremely glad to see it included. The design of this looks like most filter wheels you'd see, really good. I haven't had any bad experiences so far with filter wheels. I think maybe the worst one I ever had was an old Quantum filter wheel, I think was the brand, and even that wasn't so bad. It still lined up accurately, it just occasionally disconnected. But this thing looks really good. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent and I don't want to bore everybody half to death, but there's some mechanical drawings. Here's the included accessories. So it comes with another cable in case you don't have a Poseidon camera you want to use it with. You can use it just plugged into something else, a USB hub or whatever. It comes with filter masks, a screwdriver, some Allen keys, and some screws. A good amount of screws right there for your filters. So you've got some spares in the event you lose a few of these fiddly little boys. That's the filter wheel. Looks fantastic. Let's take a look now at the OAG Max. Now, I talked with Sean a little bit about these when he was in the process of designing them. And he was talking about the size of the prism they're going to use. And as you can see, they've opted to use a real big one, 14 by 8 millimeters. So able to accommodate any of the commonly used guide cameras on the market, like the IMX571 that it's showing right here, which is 11.3 by 7.8. And another good thing about having a kind of like a wide and low prism rather than, let's say, like quite a squared off prism is that you can physically drop it lower into the light path and get a wide area illuminated. So you've got lots of guide star options, and it better illuminates a sensor format like this, which is widescreen, if you like. So that's good to see. All the standard stuff. Helical focuser, the prism lock screw for adjusting the amount of depth you've got for that pick-off prism into your light path. And looks like it's going to be ideal to use with Player One's own guide cameras. Showing the vignetting test right here. So looks to... It's hard to see on my monitor, I guess, but it looks to be like minimal to no vignette really visible on an IMX571. Top marks. This is interesting to see how it fits to the either the filter drawer or the filter wheel. So you've got multiple fitment options and multiple fronts that can be screwed onto this off-axis guider. So all the measurements are provided for anybody interested there. Now, what comes in the package? So it comes pre-fitted with an M48 front piece attached, but it also comes in the box with an M54 front piece, which is good to see. And it looks like it's just a case of literally taking those screws out and screwing your other piece on. If you have a telescope with an M54 male termination on the back threads. Not that common, but it's good to see that they've chose to include that rather than it be like a down the road addition or something like that. So again, top marks, good to see. I'm not seeing anything standing out that I don't like the look of. I mean, here's the filter drawer Max. I think they've got two sizes of this as well. This happens to be the one with the largest clear aperture to reduce the chance of vignette. Again, looks like it's been thought about properly. So this is the kind of catchment system, a metal bead screw, which looks like a sort of a captive ball bearing inside a grub screw, probably spring loaded, that kind of thing, and it's just kind of wound into the body. So I would assume it would be possible for you to adjust the amount of preload on those if you want kind of a more positive kind of click into place when you do put that draw in. There's the detents for those bead screws right there. So when you actually click it in place, those 3 ball bearings should all just line up and go click click into that thing. Let's take a look at what we're looking at right now. So it can be screwed, as we mentioned, to actually attach as well as being threaded on. That's another potential fitting option. The package looks to be really comprehensive actually. So the filter draw max, including a draw already inside of it, and then an extra draw is included, not charged extra for. So that's really good to see. I never understood why when you buy a filter draw commonly, you're then expected to separately purchase more bloody draws. Do they expect you're going to take the draw out, unscrew the filter, swap it over? And nobody's going to do that. They're all just going to want a draw that you can swap out like this. Much better way of doing it. So it's good to see that's included as standard. An M54 to M54 adapter that consumes 2 millimeters of back focus distance. An M48 female to M54 male adapter, I assume for one side of this because it's got M54 by 0.75 pitch threads on both sides of the filter draw. And what else do we have? An M54 to M48 male adapter as well. So it's pretty much got, I think, everything you could want to actually fit this to. Anything ranging from M54 right down to M42. So really nice to see. Oh, and 2 plastic cases as well. So you can keep dust off of your spare drawer when it's not in use. Again, really good to see. I'm impressed by that. Now, I think that's just about everything. We've taken a look at what the most common competition would be, I'd say, which is the ZWO. We haven't looked at the QHY, but they're right up there as well. I know that there are cheaper implementations of the IMX571 on the market from such as TubeTech, Rising Cam, I think, if memory serves. And, you know, it's great that there are those options out there for people to explore. If it's, you know, completely just at the absolute limit of your budget and going a penny more would be backbreaking, then you've got those options. But I think if you can stretch to the extra, and as I've mentioned, I'm not sponsored by anybody, I'm not saying this for any personal benefit or anything like that. I'm just telling you what I would do if I was purchasing this right now myself or in the market for a 571. I'd be buying this one. As much as I like the ASI system and things like that, I just really believe in this company and the products that they're offering. They look so well thought out. Yes, they've got the advantage of coming to the market later than the other implementations, which is undoubtedly an advantageous position to find yourself in when designing a camera. But they've made the most of that. They haven't just came out with another recoloration of a Rising Cam or something like that. So, you know, if I was wearing a hat, I'd tip it to them. I'm pleased to see that Player One seems to be doing things, in my mind, the right way, and I hope that you guys are on board with that. I'm really pleased to see it. So I hope I haven't bored you to death with this one. I just thought we'd take a look together in a nice chilled out manner and see how this thing looks. I'm extremely excited to get my hands on this, and I can't wait to tell you all about it and get many, many, many clear nights under my belt using this fantastic camera. So until then, guys, anyway, I am gonna take a little bit of time to hopefully get rid of this damned cough and come back healthy and yeah, ready to make a bunch more content. I can't wait for this thing now. So hope that's been useful to some of you guys. Thank you so much if you stuck around this long for watching. I appreciate you very much indeed, each and every one of you guys out there. So look after yourselves, And until next time, clear skies.